We're going to bring in Brent Budowsky right now. Brent, this whole story Miranda was just talking about begs the question about what in the world is going on over at Fox News. There's a tremendous amount of change happening. Do we see the end of what has been a historic era at Fox, or what do you have any reaction to this news?
Well, it could be the end of a historic era. Now, I do want to make it clear to keep people assured, neither Miranda nor anybody else at Newsmax ever made comments about my legs.
That's true, Brent.
I want to make sure
that's true, but then you haven't been here in the
studio
studio for me to see your legs and make comments about them. So, you know, perhaps if you got out of that cesspool known as Washington, D.C. occasionally, it would be a good thing. Speaking of cesspool, let's talk about the election and what is going on. We have national polls that show basically a dead heat initially. But the poll that intrigues me is the one that was published in the Washington Post today. When you look at that, it looks pretty clear that that Hillary Clinton, your girl, has really got this thing locked up.
You know, I went into the State Department understanding classification. I'd been on the Senate Armed Services Committee for years before I was Secretary of State. I take classification seriously. The fact I couldn't remember certain meetings, whether or not they had occurred, doesn't in any way affect the commitment that I had and still have to the treatment of classified material.
I think that was supposed to be reassuring, Brett, that if she can't remember stuff, it's okay. What do you think of Hillary Clinton's chances in this election?
Well, there are different polls that show different results. There's a CNN poll that actually shows Trump leading up by a little. I don't believe it. There's an ABC poll in Texas, by the way, that shows that Hillary is ahead in Texas by a little bit. I don't necessarily believe that one either. When you have an election where so many people dislike both candidates so intensely, and I cannot remember anything like this, I'm being very careful about polls. I suspect that it's who they're angry at on a given day more than the other. It may tilt 5 or 10% one way or the other. Net, I think Hillary has a lead of 4, 5, 6 points. It is much closer than it was. Nobody should be overconfident about this election. The public is waiting for somebody to tell them what they will do as president that is both honest and true and inspiring. They're not getting that from either candidate right now. And so we're just going to have to watch. I have nightmares about what this debate could be. If it shapes up when they debate the way I think it will, you may have 100% have a negative rating of both of them.
Yeah, you know what? I'm tempted to laugh when I say this, but actually it's fairly serious. We have two candidates that nobody likes. Their favorability ratings are so tremendously low. You could make an argument that whoever wins, whether it be Hillary or it be Donald, that they're there, but just because they weren't the other person. That's sad, Brent.
Oh, it's terrible. It's tragic. It's horrible. It's a sad commentary on American politics that this is what they come up with. Republicans are pulling their hair out because if they had nominated somebody that most Republicans believe is credible, which they don't believe Trump is, had they done that, they'd be ahead of Hillary by 8 to 10 points. Democrats are pulling their hair out because if we had nominated a candidate who has more appeal and credibility than Hillary, we'd be beating Trump by 15 points. It is a terrible situation. If either candidate breaks out and actually tells people what they will do that is good for the country and good for their lives, that candidate, I think, will do better than people expect. It's more likely that Hillary does it, but she seems to be allergic to doing anything except attacking Trump. I think it's a terrible mistake. Her campaign and the Clintons are aware of my views about this. Obviously, I've had no influence getting them to take a more constructive course. But as recently as an hour ago, I'm working it again, and watch my column in the Hill tomorrow.
Well, yeah,
it's on Thursday.
It's interesting, Brett, that you say neither has said what they would do. It may not be inspirational, but at least Trump has laid out ideas about foreign policy, laid out ideas in terms of economics, and has been a little more specific in terms of his tax code and what he's might or might not do in regards to immigration. Hillary hasn't, and she hasn't had a news conference where people could ask her what she's thinking. I'm sure that as a journalist and a Democrat, you probably urged them to hold a news conference and get out there. Why hasn't she got out in front of the press and just taken questions and at least created the appearance of being an open, accessible candidate?
Well, the real truth, and no one has told me this directly, is that the Clinton people think they have the election in the bag. They believe that Trump is so bad, which in many ways he is, but they believe they don't have to do anything. So they run the four-corner offense that Dean Smith used to do in North Carolina basketball. They're stalling the game. I think it's a mistake. I think it makes it more dangerous for her in the election, but even more, it makes it hard for her to claim a mandate for anything if she wins. We are going to elect a president, whoever wins this, who will be the most unpopular and distrusted president-elect in American history. And while I am a Democrat and infinitely prefer Hillary Clinton, I think they have both run tragically bad campaigns. They have both done a disservice to the voters. Most people in politics agree with me. They won't say it. I just did.
Yeah, you know, I will agree with you with this fact. I hate defensive play. I can't stand not finishing a game. You know, in my opinion, politics should be the same way. You know, if you're going to run a campaign, then get out there and run it right to the very end, aggressively, hard, and win people over to your side. You have a column talking about what Hillary could do. I don't agree with you, Brett, but you put an idea out there that she needs to come forward and put a plan down that says, this is what I'm going to do to get people back to work, because at the end of the day, so much of this election really is about the economy.
Yeah, and my lack of influence is proven by the fact that she didn't do on Labor Day what I recommended she do. And I would argue my wiseness in suggesting it was proven by the fact that she walked in her airplane, spent the whole weekend talking about the Clinton emails. Now, I think the issue that concerns America is jobs and wages. There are bills pending that have been around for 6 years to rebuild America's roads, ports, bridges, schools, etc. They can be passed in 45 days. Democrats support them, Republicans support them, big business, big labor, small business all supports them. Why in the heck isn't somebody talking about doing that? What Americans want is a better way of life, more jobs, and incomes and wages that rise more than the little they have risen over the last 30 years. That's what people care about in their homes, in their family dinners, in their churches, in their schools, and neither candidate is addressing it. My plea, again, obviously so far unsuccessful, but stay tuned, is that that's what a Democratic candidate like Clinton ought to be doing, not running a totally negative campaign.
But I agree with that last part, but the problem is they've been talking about shovel-ready projects since George Bush was president. We haven't seen any of that materialize ever, and we've got 30 seconds for you to explain why not.
Because of a lack of leadership by President Obama, Republicans, Democrats, and Republicans in Washington. When the lack of leadership changes and we get a leader, that will change, and the bill will happen, and the jobs will be created.
Brent, I might get my pronunciation right here, writer for The Hill and former aide to Senator Lloyd Bentsen, you are so right. When leadership is absent, we all suffer. Up next, economist and columnist Peter Morici. Stay right here.